for the transition to finish. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and konbanwa, wherever you are in the world. I am the idol to give you the wings to fly, Cyber Angel, Rita Kamishiro, at your service. And welcome to my, I laugh because, not because of the subject that we have today, but because we had a little bit of a situation with the stream, but that's okay. I'll explain it for those who are tuning in for the first time, I guess. But just to kind of start things off, welcome to my very first fundraiser for To Write Love on Her Arms as a To Write Love on Her Arms ambassador. On World Suicide Prevention Day, 2024. And for those who are tuning in for the first time and don't know what just happened, I got a notification. I was like, it was so funny. I was like halfway through my intro. And, you know, I saw like a yellow bar on my other monitor. I was like, oh, I should probably check that out. And I got a notification and it said, you know, someone in your community was concerned about you. And, you know, so we've paused the stream, we stopped the stream, and like making sure that you're okay. Which I thought was, I think that's a really nice like sort of thing that they have, you know, make sure, reach out to their creators and things like that. But of course it got flagged and, you know, subsequently got taken down. So that's why we're here, part 2, a little bit, you know, a little bit delayed on that front, sorry. But I do want to take a second to mention that I am okay. This is a very difficult conversation to have, to listen in, I'm sure. And of course, an even more difficult conversation to have. But I'm okay. This is a cause that I'm very, you know, passionate about. I very much believe in suicide prevention. So, you know, even though it's a difficult conversation to have, I'm okay. So I appreciate the concern from whoever out there may have been a concerned viewer. But maybe should I turn the music on? Like maybe that'll make things a little less scary, perhaps. But yes, it will get rather serious today. But for those who don't know why we're fundraising today, I'll give a brief sort of introduction again. Unfortunately, that first part was, you know, included in the initial stream, but I'll go ahead and, you know, give a brief sort of summary again. If you are not aware, September is Suicide Prevention Month, and that includes National Suicide Prevention Week, which is this week, and World Suicide Prevention Day, which is today. And this is a very important time for us to educate and support one another so that people can turn to their attention to these very difficult topics of mental health and suicide prevention. Because suicide prevention, like I mentioned before, it starts with all of us. It starts with you as an individual. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to know that resources out there exist, and we have to be prepared to have honest conversations, similar to one that we're having today, but having honest conversations maybe with loved ones about the topic as well, so we can create a world where it's not as scary or taboo to reach out for help. So, like I said, one of the big messages we're trying to say today is, please stay alive. That is our goal, right? You know, stay alive for a better future, better days, a possibility for change. You know, find and embrace your community. Become that hope and community for somebody else. So, yeah. Please, just stay. Yeah, and so, I just got a notification. I thought I was being flagged again, but it was actually a notification from YouTube. Oh, good news, everyone! My stream was not violating stream rules. Yeah. I appealed it as soon as my stream went down. But yeah, like I've mentioned before, having these topics and conversations to bring awareness and share resources is very important. And it may be a difficult conversation. And so if today's stream may be rather triggering for you, if it's a difficult conversation for you to have right now, there is no hard feelings for stepping out, for taking care of yourself at any point in the stream, if you need to. I'm trying to remember what all I said already. I guess I could let me go back through my presentation. This beginning part's gonna be a little bit rough now that I've kind of just tried to figure out where we were. But yeah, for those who don't know, we're fundraising for To Write Love on Her Arms. And To Write Love on Her Arms is a nonprofit organization that aims to present hope for people struggling with addiction, depression, self-injury, and thoughts of suicide, while also investing in treatment and recovery. So they host and they collate and they keep up various tools, a couple of which I have linked in the description. They have their Find Help tool. So whether you're based in the US or you're based internationally, you can connect to resources that are local to you. So be sure to check that out if you feel the need to. They also have the Mental Health Toolkit. This is a sort of introductory toolkit that offers accessible mental health exercises, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. So it's a great starting point if you're wanting to start that journey with your mental health. They also are involved with Between the Bells, which is a school program for grades 9 to 12 to spark conversations about mental health as well. And of course, your fundraising also helps provide funding for treatment and recovery. So things like one-on-one support from program coordinators, directly fund therapy sessions, whether bi-weekly or maybe on a 30-minute, 60-minute, therapy session basis. And $300, I think we've hit that milestone, actually helps us cover a full month of care for someone in need. So, woohoo! Awesome milestone there, you guys. But yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit briefly about the things that were in the first part of the stream, just in case some folks weren't here for that. I should also probably private the other stream so people aren't confused as to why there's two. So I'll do that real quickly. Boop. Save. And friendly reminder that this is I'm okay, so you don't need to flag the stream. We're doing good stuff here. Difficult conversation, but I promise we are doing our part to help support our community. But yes, to talk a little bit about what we're doing today, I'm kind of doing a sort of presentation about this anime that I watched with the Archangels. And like I said, there is this sort of like sci-fi, wibbly wobbly timey wimey gimmick to it. But for all its, shortcomings in that regard, I thought, that it was a great vehicle for starting this conversation about mental health and the importance of friendship and support systems. And again, since we are starting this presentation over from the beginning, I do want to take a second to put some content warnings on screen, just in case, for the topics that we'll be talking about during the presentation. If any of them are triggering for you, like I mentioned, if any of these are triggering for you, then please protect your peace by stepping away from the stream either now or at any point during the stream if it becomes too much for you. No hard feelings. We'll see you in the next stream. And I also want to take a second to mention that while I am facilitating this presentation about mental health and creating a space for us to think about, these related topics, please note that I'm not a mental health professional, and the conversations we're having today are very important, but they are not a substitute for professional help. So if you or someone you know is struggling, I highly encourage you to reach out to a licensed therapist, counselor, or mental health provider. And I have resources in the description below where you can seek professional support, because again, your mental health matters, and you don't have to go through it alone. But yeah, let's dive into Orange. Now, Orange is an anime that touches on a lot of different topics. I mentioned love, friendship, life, school, things like that. But the topics that I really wanted to focus on today in terms of my presentation, and again, this is a presentation, so I apologize if I'm not super able to catch all the chat messages. I will have some moments where I'll pause and kind of sit a little bit with the topics. For the most part, I'll be looking at my sticky notes. my little... I worked a lot on this over the weekend. So I went back and I rewatched the anime. And I jotted down some notes and things like that. Went back and watched some other presentations as well. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm kind of reading off of my notes. Water check. But yeah, this largely will have to do with starting a conversation, right? About mental health, suicide prevention, and being there to support your loved ones. So I'll give a brief summary of the story before talking about one of the main characters and his struggles, the signs of his suicidal ideation, and what his friends did to help prevent harm. So with that being said, let's talk about the story of Orange. The story of Orange follows, at the top left, you'll see a girl. Her name is Naho Takamiya. She is a high school girl who starts receiving mysterious letters from her future self. So that's what I mentioned earlier about the whole sci-fi aspect to it. And even though there's a sci-fi aspect to it, I think there's a lot of very real things that I think I took away, at least, as something I thought was a good takeaway. And these letters that she's receiving from her future self detail very specific events that happen over the coming school year, and they urge her to make different choices to prevent the death of a new transfer student, Kakeru Naruse, who is struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts. And throughout the course of the series, Naho and her friends try to alter the future, and they grow closer to Kakeru and begin to uncover his emotional pain. And in the first episode, after Kakeru's first day at the new school, Naho's friends invite him to hang out with them. Seeing the new kid at school, want to invite him, include him. And initially, he was reluctant to go with them after school. But after being convinced, he takes care of some business on his phone and proceeds to head out with the group. He has a great time with the group that day, but the following day, he's absent from school and stays absent for weeks. And later on, we find out that the quick email he had to send on his phone before going out with his friends was a message from his mother before she took her own life. So a lot of really, already a very heavy topic there. So I think Shiny sent a message, so I do want to point out to his message. And again, friendly reminder, if at any point in the stream you need to take a second for yourself and protect your peace and your safety, by all means, please do so. But let's talk a little bit about Kakeru and some of his struggles. Kakeru's mother had placed really high expectations on him, particularly related to family responsibilities and her, the mother's well-being. And Kakeru felt pressured to meet his mother's emotional needs, and he felt very overwhelmed by her dependence on him. And the day that his mother took her own life, she had reached out to him asking if they could spend time together. And when he chose to stay with his friends instead, Kakeru led himself to believe that his rejection had directly caused his mother's death. And that's the primary reason behind his suicidal thoughts, is the guilt that he felt over his mother's death. He believed that if he had gone home that day, he could have prevented her death. And this cycle of self-blame and regret haunts him throughout the series. his shame and inability to forgive himself for what he perceives as his failure keeps him from healing and moving forward. The loss of his mother was incredibly traumatic, and Kakeru struggled with processing that event, and his inability to cope with his emotions left him in a state of despair. He sort of believed that because he felt he caused his mother's death, he felt that he doesn't deserve to be happy. This led him to push away opportunities for joy or connection, and he found it difficult to open up about his struggles, even to his friends. And this hesitance to be vulnerable with others kept him from the support that could have helped him deal with his pain. He was very, prone to hiding his true feelings, putting on a facade that everything was okay, and that really reinforced his sense of isolation and hopelessness. He was unable to share the full extent of his pain with them, and he felt that no one could truly understand what he was going through. And, suicide really rarely has a single cause, right? It often emerges when multiple stressors, health challenges combine, can lead to these feelings of hopelessness and despair. He had to deal with his guilt, his grief, and even before, the loss of his mother, he had to deal with the stress of having to be the support system for his mother, having to deal with moving to a new school, and having to deal with his old friend group not taking him seriously. And that sort of made him feel trapped, and it made him feel hopeless and unable to see a future for himself. 90% of people who die by suicide actually have an underlying and potentially treatable mental health condition. So, as I mentioned before, leading up to the events of the show, he had actually dealt with a lot of stressful and difficult things in his life that were harmful to his mental health. And I think at one point, his grandmother had tried to reach out to him to go to the hospital and seek help. And unfortunately, he did not take her advice. And that could have been help that he could have really needed. We talked a little bit about Kakeru's depression, but things like bipolar disorder as well and substance use are also strongly linked to suicidal thinking and behavior. And I just kind of give sort of like a understanding of what Kakeru was having to deal with and the state of his mental health leading into this next section, which is the signs of suicidal ideation. So again, we're kind of talking about fiction and things like that, things that aren't real. But as we talk about these signs that Kakeru exhibited, think about different, other signs that you may have experienced or that may, because we're gonna have a conversation about it at the end of this section, and I kind of want to point out 3 sort of types of signs, and that's behaviors, feelings, and words. So keep that in mind, and I'll talk a little bit about the signs that Kakeru exhibited throughout the show. The first one I wanted to talk to ties into what I talked in the previous section. First of all, pause. I want to take a second. I put a note to myself to pause between the sections, but I didn't do that. So I'm going to do it now that I remember to do that. This can be a lot to take in. But the reason why I kind of wanted to give that context is, I mentioned it before, there's a cause to these, to this effect. I kind of do things in a cause-effect solution sort of structure. But there was a reason. There was you know, there were multiple stressors in his life and challenges that he had to go through before leading up to his suicide. So I kind of wanted to give that sort of context and understand that it is a very complex internal battle that people have to go through. Yeah, and I agree, Nara. I think fiction is a great place to explore these difficult topics, because, you know, hopefully these aren't things that you experience or have to think about on a day-to-day basis, but by, you know, utilizing media, whether it's anime or video games, TV shows, or movies, we can have these difficult conversations with ourselves. You know, what could we do in these situations? What would we do? How can we support ourselves and others in these situations if they were to ever come up? Yeah. So, with that being said, a nice little pause. Everyone's okay? Water check. Let's talk about the signs that Kakeru exhibited. And like I said, this first one I kind of wanted to talk about because of this previous section tying into this idea of guilt and self-blame that Kakeru would express. When Kakeru finally opens up to Naho about his mother's death in episode 6, the first half of the anime kind of deals with a couple of other things, you know, love, school life, things like that. But all the while, Kakeru is dealing with this in the background. And he is rather reluctant at first to talk about these more difficult emotional pains he has. But yeah, guilt and self-blame for what had happened is one sign. He feels shame and he blames himself for what happened. He says things like, you know, you'll probably hate me if I tell you about it. I regret so many choices, or this regret hurts. And that's sort of those words that he shares with Naho, I think were, at least when I was watching the show, a very concerning sign. And after this conversation he kind of asks to be alone for a little bit afterwards. He kind of sits at a bench further away, but, you know, all of a sudden he leaves the premises, I guess, without telling any of his friends who he went with to the festival that evening. And that kind of leads me into the next concerning sign, which is withdrawal from friends and activities. Later on in the episode, Suwa, one of Kakeru's friends, shows up to Naho's house and says, "Hey, Kakeru hasn't been showing up to practice much lately. I thought you might know why." And that's concerning for two things. Not only is Kakeru withdrawing from his usual activities, right, club practice, he's also not telling his friends about it and why. This kind of emphasizes that growing emotional withdrawal that he has as his feelings of guilt and his depression deepens, despite his friends wanting to include him. So, yeah, it didn't even register to me the first time I watched it, because the first thing I thought of was like, oh yeah, he's not showing up to practices and things like that. But then I realized, like, oh, he's also not telling his friends about it, because Suwa doesn't know and Naho doesn't know either, and they're two of his, you know, good friends at the new school. Another concerning sign was his sudden mood changes. On episode 10, they have a sports festival, and Kakeru initially appears to enjoy his time with Naho and their friends at the sports festival. But as he starts thinking about, you know, his mother, as he's reminded of his mother, his mood shifts, and he says things like, you know, I feel guilty for having fun. You know, I want to laugh and have fun, but today I just don't feel like I can do that. And that was another concerning sign. Another one that's, sorry, jumping a little bit across the anime a little bit, I should have ordered these, was expressions of hopelessness. Very early on in the anime, I think episode 3. And this one's a little tough because it was a letter that he wrote and put into an envelope for, ideally his future self to open in the future. Because the group decided when they were younger that they're going to write letters to their future selves. And everyone opens their letters, and it is a letter to themselves, except for Kakeru. He did not write a letter to his future self. He wrote a letter to his friends. Instead, he said, I hope even 10 years in the future, you all stay good friends who laugh together. I hope 10 years from now, you're all still good friends and that you're having fun. And this sign of him not thinking about him having a future was very concerning. Another one, oh, sorry, again, jumping back to episode 10, back to the sports festival. Yeah, exactly, Dwight. The fact that he used you instead of we and didn't include himself in that future just expresses that sense of hopelessness that he had. Another sign that I thought was concerning during the sports festival, Suwa and Kakeru are having a conversation before one of the events that they're in. And Suwa asks Kakeru if he's worried that he hasn't asked out Naho. Because Naho and Kakeru had, talked to one another, had sort of talked about their feelings for one another, but Kakeru hadn't officially asked Naho out, and Suwa was wondering, like, hey, are you worried about that? Like, why haven't you done that yet? And Kakeru said that he wasn't worried about it, and that he'd be more worried if Naho did start dating Kakeru. And he told Suwa, his friend, he says, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. He takes a moment, pause, and then he adds, there's a chance I might move again. If we went out, who knows when I might disappear, and that would be too hard on Naho. And yeah, sure, he does add the sort of like, there's a chance I might move again, but I think in context with everything else, I think he sort of added that to kind of like retroactively, like, oh, I don't want to cause too much alarm, if that makes sense. I think one thing I'll talk about later is I think people who deal with this sort of with suicidal ideation or similar struggles, I think feel like they are a burden to their friends or to their loved ones. And I think because of that thinking, he might have added that to kind of not cause alarm or, make it seem like not a big of a deal. But I think considering everything else, this was a very concerning sign. The last sign I wanted to talk about in the anime specifically before we kind of talk about signs in general to kind of wrap up this section is risky behavior. In episode 13, after Kakeru had learned about very difficult news about his mother, he is seen walking recklessly through traffic without concern for his own safety. And it shows that he is growing rather indifferent to his own safety. And I think later on in the episode, he even confesses to his friends, who are thankfully able to act and in this moment of crisis and prevent any harm happening to Kakeru. He confesses to them at he didn't really care what would happen to him. So risky behavior is a sign that I noticed in the show. But with those sort of examples given from the show, I kind of wanted to wrap this section up with I guess, more examples and maybe recap some of the ones that we talked about. So in terms of behaviors, one that I had mentioned before with Kakeru was mood changes, dramatic mood changes, reckless behavior. That's one I just mentioned. That withdrawal from friends or isolation from friends. But another one, other ones that you may see could include a change in your sleep, a change in your eating habits. Maybe you're not taking care of yourself as much. Your hygiene might not be as good. Maybe you have a drop in your school performance or your work performance. Maybe you're not as interested in your hobbies that you're normally interested in. Giving away things that are important to you is often a sign as well. Another one that I think is very interesting as well is sudden, like, calmness, like a sudden shift to where it seems like they might be okay. And oftentimes that can happen before something drastic happens, as the individual may have, found that sort of calm from having decided on doing something drastic already. So even if someone may seem like they are okay, that might not be the case. But in terms of feelings, I talked about that guilt and that shame that Kakeru had felt, that hopelessness, not thinking about the future, not feeling like he has a future. Worthlessness is also a common feeling. Feeling trapped, feeling angry, feeling empty, are common feelings. And we talked a little bit about the different words that Kakeru said. Specifically, we mentioned, who knows when I might disappear? I don't know how long I'm going to be here. Using, you instead of we when talking about the future. Other words, thinking like, I wish I won't wake up, or I wish I wasn't born. Feeling like they are a mistake or a failure or a burden. Saying things like, if I see you again, things would be better off if, things like that. But yeah, I wanted to make this section to kind of give examples from this specific media, and hopefully you can take these away, and as you go out and try to support your loved ones, hopefully you can keep an eye out for these signs, and you can, hopefully it'll empower you to be there for others when they are struggling. So keep an eye out for these signs. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is how they approached Kakeru. And one thing that I thought really stood out to me in this show was pause. I just remembered. I just saw my sticky note. Pause for a little brain break. Water check. How are we doing? Any thoughts? Any takeaways? Let me go back to this. I do want to shout out Mr. Aegis. If you don't... I had his link to his video in my description previously, but now I do not have that anymore. I had that in the previous stream. Let me grab it. Oh yeah! Now that my previous stream is not deleted, it is fully here now. Because it does not violate YouTube community guidelines. I can copy my description from that, because I worked really hard to put that together. Let's see. Cool. Shout out to a friend of the channel. Mr. Aegis is a VTuber, and he holds several degrees in health-related fields and often streams health lessons to bring these important topics to folks. So please go check out his channel. And I'll shout out the specific stream later as well for our charity fundraiser concert we had earlier this year. He did a panel for us as well on mental health first aid. And while I'm not a mental health professional, I am, as someone who wants to advocate and share awareness and support. So shout out to him for a really informative lesson. I learned a lot from that. And I hope that my takeaways from his lesson convey properly to you all. The link to that stream is in the description down below. It's a lot more thorough in terms of the conversations that we're having here. He does have his own disclaimers and things because it does dive in very deep. I guess more so than this sort of jumping board of a conversation starter that we have today. But yeah, a lot of the things that I included here were things that I learned from his presentation, so I just wanted to shout out for all the awesome work that he's doing as well. But yeah. Yeah, that's totally right, Oishi. So some of the signs seem obvious when looking back, but at the moment it's hard to see. That's a really, that reminded me of a point that I wanted to make. I talked a little bit about this before in my Until Then recap stream about this idea of guilt and regret and balancing that with, thinking like, what could I do in the future to prevent something like this from happening again? Like, how can I be prepared? Because a lot of times things like in tragedy, people might think, oh, I should have known, or I should have done this instead. I should have done that. But I think you need to know the balance between, looking back and thinking, maybe I should have done this differently. Like, in the future, I'll do this differently to support my loved ones. And being stuck in this cycle of self-blame and regret, like, oh, I should have done this, things like that. Because a lot of the friends in this show do experience that, right? In the future, they read these letters, they think about their time back then, and they thought, how, like, I totally would have done something different if I had known, and things like that. And I think it's really important to not blame yourself for things like that. I think a lot goes into anything that happens in the world, and I think blaming yourself solely for things that happen, is just not fair. Yeah, Roy, actually, this part that I'm talking about was also, for me, the part in the anime that was really, that stood out to me. But yeah, I think, it's important to, be aware of things that you could be looking out for and things like that. But you can't have the answers to everything, and you're not going to know everything, and you shouldn't blame yourself for, for tragedy. Hindsight is 20/20. Yeah, exactly. Just about anything. So, you're not going to be able to know everything. And so I think it'd be unfair to yourself to blame yourself. It is very hard to catch things like this the first time you come into contact with it. I agree. So how can you approach someone after seeing the signs? Great question to segue into this next section. And again, I wanted to highlight something that really stood out to me in this show. And what that was that they clearly confront Kakeru about his feelings, and they encourage him to open up. Of course, it being an anime, some parts of the scene are very over dramatic and could have been handled with a little bit more tact, but I think the fact that they even had the conversation so directly with Kakeru to begin with was very valuable to have in the anime. And for copyright reasons, I'm not going to show you all the clip, But the scene plays out something like this. So, just a friendly reminder, Kakeru is the black-haired individual, Naho's the girl, Suwa is the tall, red-haired individual. But the scene plays out like this. Kakeru and his two friends here, Suwa and Naho, are in the classroom after school, presumably for cleaning duty, when Naho spots Kakeru staring out the window. He tries to brush off a few comments he makes about if he were Superman, that he could fly away if he jumped out the window, or that he could have saved his mom. But Naho finds this behavior very concerning. Suwa then joins in on the conversation when Kakeru realizes his friends are up to something. So Kakeru asks, "What's this coming from?" And Suwa replies, "It's coming from never knowing why you won't talk to us, especially when you're hurting." Kakeru initially tries to brush off the conversation, then he apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry. There's no way I can talk to you guys about this. I'm lucky to have you as friends, so when we hang out, I want to laugh." To which Suwa responds, "Real friends support each other. They talk. If you hurt, then say something. I know that we can help you if you just let us. And what kind of people would we be if we could sit around and laugh while you're suffering alone?" And after a brief pause, Suwa asks the question to Kakeru, very calmly, "Do you ever think about wanting to die?" And Kakeru, tearing up, responds, "I do. Every day." Suwa asks why, and Kakeru replies, "Because it's my fault." And he continues to vent to Suwa and Naho and explains his feelings to his friends. And from here on, things get a little dramatic as it is a TV show. Another plot line sort of weaves its way in and such. But I wanted to take a second to break down this scene a little bit. And again, for a full breakdown, I really want to point to Mr. Aegis's panel. He holds, again, several degrees in health-related fields, and he streams health lessons very frequently about these topics. And I linked his mental health first aid stream in the description if you want to check it out. I think he does talk about a couple of other topics as well. But it's a great way to know, as a regular everyday person, what you can do in moments of crises to support someone who is struggling. So I wanted to go ahead and break down this scene. First things first is the fact that they started the conversation. They had this talk. Suwa kind of brought the subject up to Kakeru. "Hey, I noticed that you're not talking to us. Especially when you're hurting. This is what it seems like." Kind of asking, or kind of giving his concerns to Kakeru. I think being very calm is helpful. Calm, but also empathetic. Not judging your friend, this individual, being patient, but also being very objective in your approach. And they were in a private place. There wasn't a lot of noise or distraction. Kakeru wasn't around other people who maybe he felt uncomfortable with. He was just with his two friends, his two closest friends in this new school that he is in. And the second point that I wanted to kind of unpack was that they asked the question. I think specifically he asked, "Do you ever think about wanting to die?" And I think a lot of people, jump back at asking the question, are you thinking of killing yourself? I think people jump back at that and they think oh, that seems counterintuitive, but not talking about the question directly and frankly is more problematic. Again, I learned this from Mr. Aegis' stream. It doesn't plant the seed. It doesn't, give them the idea. it gives them the ability to be honest and direct. They might feel relief, like, oh, I can finally talk about this. They might feel noticed and acknowledged. But it's, it's about not shaming them. Like, it's having these thoughts are not a failing on your part. Being able to reduce that shame. Exactly, treating them with respect. Yeah. I think, also being, I don't know, did I mention patient? Being, giving them space, kind of, making sure that they are safe, whether psychologically or physically. And of course, for more details, I highly recommend checking out Mr. Aegis's presentation. But the question, after the question, of course, there comes the fact of helping them out, and two ways that this could go. If you have the conversation, and not in this case, but if they say that they haven't, the conversation doesn't end there. You want to continue listening to them and allowing them to talk about how they feel. Let them vent, let them know that you're listening, like, this is what I'm hearing, rather than kind of like giving your own opinion on it, right? You want to say like, oh, what I'm hearing is this is what you're feeling. Again, you don't want to give your opinion on things. You don't want to be like, oh, it's nothing, you'll get over it, minimizing that feeling. You don't want to guilt them, like, oh, you're gonna make other people feel sad. Make sure you are focused in on the conversation. Don't be distracted. Again, like, don't be like, oh, just exercise or drink water. Don't do that. But yeah, offer your help where you can, in finding resources, connecting them with help, and make sure that they are able to kind of decide the route that they want to take in terms of what kind of help they want to have. I think giving them that agency to decide, oh, maybe I'll reach out to a counselor, or maybe I'll reach out to this hotline. But yeah, it's really important to, even though there isn't an immediate crisis, it's important to still stay connected, stay supporting them, encourage them to seek help, and follow up with them. It's not gonna stop there. You want to make sure that they are okay. I think it is a very difficult conversation to have. As someone who's had to have a conversation like this before, one thing I really liked about Mr. Aegis's presentation is that he does do a demonstration as well. So if the idea of having a conversation or asking the question is daunting for you, I think having that chance to practice that situation, I think, is very helpful. But yeah, if you do ask the question and they have, you want to ask for more information. How or when, or do you have any plans? Have you started preparing? If they have something with them that might be harmful, like, take it, ask for it, make sure that they're not in immediate harm. And you want to, again, remind them that, sort of reduce this shame, remind them that having these thoughts aren't a failing on your part. They're not uncommon, and you're not alone, right? Help exists. But yeah, you don't want to leave them alone. You don't want to keep it secret. And give them your input and be proactive. So make sure you put them in contact with a mental health professional, whether it's their doctor or hospital, a crisis hotline, or local hotlines. The most important thing is don't leave them alone. make sure you, I've had to do this before, but if they want to go to a counselor's office, offer to like walk them there, or offer to like, hey, like if you want someone to sit here with you while you call, or like making sure that they're not alone in this time of crisis is very important. And if you feel as if you, from this situation, you know, it's a very difficult thing to deal with. It's very important to also reach out for guidance yourself. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and making sure that you take care of yourself too. After the fact, after the situation, is very important. But the important note is, if there is a risk of suicide, someone with greater training than yourself, right, being a layperson, needs to be involved. It is a moment of crisis, and you want to make sure that the person that you are talking to is connected with the appropriate professional help. Yeah, it's a very difficult conversation and situation to be in. But I'm really glad that, you know, in not just, I guess, in this show, but I guess I'm really grateful when media showcases these very difficult moments. Because again, what it does is it reminds you that this is something you can't do, right? That it's not shameful to talk about, that it's scary, yes, but it's something that you can do to help support other people. And again, I know I've said this multiple times, definitely check out the presentation. I learned a lot from it. And I think you can learn a lot from it too if you feel maybe, I don't know if I'm prepared to have a conversation like this, and I want a little bit more extra support for that. So, because again, I'm not a mental health professional, just someone here to share, you know, awareness of the topic and share the things that I've learned. But I learned a lot from that presentation, and I highly recommend you all check it out too. But in addition to this very, very intense situation that they talked about in the show, I wanted to talk about some of the things that they did outside of, you know, that specific situation. Just things as friends that they did to help support Kakeru. And sure, they may have had supernatural letters telling them, you know, what's going on, and, you know, giving them ideas like, hey, like, this is his birthday is this day, like, just letting you know. But I still think there's a lot we can learn from how his friends supported him through his struggles. They reached out to include him whenever they could. Again, they like tried to play off like, hey, you know, when's your birthday? What can we get you? Things that he would want, and they threw him a birthday party, surprised him with gifts. They invited his grandma to the sports festival. You know, when they realized no one was there to show up for him, so he can feel included. And I think they were very attentive to his behavior. Again, it can be really hard in retrospect to like know what to look out for, and that's why I do stuff like this, where, you know, we can sort of review or take a look at what this might look like. But they take note of when Kakeru behaves oddly or says something weird or responds coldly, and they talk together about what they can do to help him out. And they, as a group, decide to act together to support Kakeru. And they make a collective decision to work together to prevent harm from happening to Kakeru. And like I said, they really try to help him feel included and show him that they value him, that he's not a burden, that, you know, they look forward to spending time with him. They ask him how he feels about certain things, like, how do you feel about that, you know? They show their concern for him. they remind him that, hey, you can talk to us, and that's what we're here for. A quote that I wrote down from the sports festival episode 10, is they say to him, sometimes things are too heavy to carry by yourself. We're here for you, okay? Don't worry. It's not that heavy with all of us. And of course, they are willing to take immediate action in a crisis. When they, in the last episode, water check. In the last episode, when they found out that Kakeru had disappeared from his home, and his grandmother didn't know where he went, they immediately sprung into action. They immediately started looking for him, asking around if anyone's seen him. This one was dramatic, but of course in the anime they have like supernatural letters and stuff. One of his friends in his letter from his future self found out that Kakeru had taken his bike that evening, and so his friend took it upon himself to like lock up his bike and make sure he couldn't take his bike. So being able to act quickly in a situation where someone's life is at immediate risk is a very important, action. But yeah, I think the actions that his friends sort of demonstrate throughout the show, it really shows you the importance of being present, right? Offering support, acting decisively when a loved one shows concerning signs. But yeah, I sort of kind of wanted to wrap up on that sort of note. And with that is the end of my presentation. I do have a couple of, I guess, summary type stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to kind of like touch upon how Orange, while it's not entirely about like, because it talks about like love and school and things like that, but I think a lot of the topics surrounding mental health, struggles like guilt or isolation and depression affecting Kakeru's well-being and sort of lending itself to his suicidal ideation, I think was a very important topic to kind of think about and break down, I guess. Kakeru as a character, for me, reminded me that people may be struggling silently, even when surrounded by loved ones. But yeah, I think, like I mentioned before, this show really highlights the importance of friendship and support, and how Naho and the friend group, how them being attentive and reaching out and offering their support really played a role in preventing Kakeru's death, and really offering a listening ear or just being there for someone can really make a difference. Because like I said earlier, suicide prevention starts with you. It starts with us as a community. By taking care of ourselves, again, sharing these resources, knowing that they're out there, and being ready and willing to have these difficult and honest conversations, we can again create a world where asking for help isn't shameful, it's not taboo, it's not stigmatized. But yeah, I thought that was a very powerful sign. So I hopefully, today through the presentation, we learned through this show how his mental health struggles had led to some of these concerning signs. What do these signs look like in terms of his suicidal ideation, and what his friends were able to do in order to prevent that, whether that's the conversation that they had very directly, very honestly, very candidly, to help Kakeru open up and get connected with support and help. And then also, what we can do just day by day, how we can support one another. But like I've mentioned before, if you or a loved one is struggling, there are resources in the description. And it doesn't have to be in a crisis. If you do know someone who may find themselves in a crisis, there are resources specifically for that in the description. But there's also in the description resources that you can access at any point in your mental health journey, because you don't need to be in a crisis to take care of your mental health. And with that being said, thank you all so much for listening in to my presentation. I appreciate everyone's patience with the stream sort of technical issue earlier on, for sharing your thoughts, your stories. I didn't get to read everything. I was a little locked in on presenting, but I did see a lot of really good conversation, and I want to share thanks for everyone who shared their personal experiences or their perspectives, because I know firsthand from hosting presentations and talks like this, it's not easy. It's very difficult. But I think the more we open up and the more that we have very honest and open conversations, the easier it becomes. It's not going to ever be easy, but I think it helps knowing that we're not alone and that other people are rooting for you, and hoping for the best for you. Let me go ahead and take a moment to thank our donators today. I'll be closing the donation campaign thingamabob by the time stream ends. But we're going to be fundraising throughout the entire month, so be sure to check out To Write Love on Her Arms, as well as the other To Write Love on Your Arms ambassadors, or just streamers who support as well. There's going to be lots of fundraisers throughout the month, so fundraising doesn't end here. You can always check out another streamer's stream. Some of them maybe just streaming and playing games and bringing awareness through their fundraiser. So you can definitely tune in for those. If maybe the more conversation, discussion, presentation-based ones are a little bit more triggering and difficult to consume for you. All sorts of kinds of fundraisers are happening this month, so be sure to check those out. There's plenty of opportunities to support. It does not have to be mine. I'm just letting you know. I do appreciate everyone who's donated today. Let's see here. Demon Warrior, thank you so much for the kind words. Demon Warrior says, let's keep hope shining. Here's to seeing the next morning. Even on the darkest of days, the sun will always shine the next day. I agree. Thank you so much for your kind words, Demon Warrior. Ultron says, thank you for doing this. You're very welcome. This is stuff I'm very passionate about, so it's something that I'm thankful to you all for being very open-minded and respectful and, vulnerable as well, especially for those who are willing to share their experiences and their thoughts. Ultron says it's a very important cause, and I'm glad that you're taking the time to talk about and support it. Of course, happy to, and thank you again, Ultron, for your donation. Meridan and Sang, thank you so much for the donation. Let's see. Twy, thank you so much for the donation. Thank you again for doing such important work. Thank you, Twy. Thank you so much for, for being such a great supporter as well for mental health. And I really appreciate it. For those who don't know, Twy was part of our charity concert earlier this year. Yeah, Blade made a point earlier about how Kakeru, I believe this is about how Kakeru, kept to himself and didn't really share. It felt like he was a burden for his friends. Blade says it's sometimes of how people grew up in life. It's very little of choice on a perspective that is like self-keeping. mostly wearing a mental mask in order to protect themselves. That's true. It may have been actually a good point that you brought that up, because what had happened with Kakeru is that in his previous school he tried to open up to his friends about his situation, what had happened with his mother, and they didn't take him seriously. They thought he was joking. They were like, "Oh, you got us," like, haha, and that was very harmful and traumatic for Kakeru. And I don't, I don't blame him. I can understand and empathize with him feeling, hesitant to share that information again, especially with people that he's just met. So I can understand where that difficulty came from. But I'm glad he was able to find friends who were willing to hear him out and listen to him. And, maybe it did take reminding from his friends. Like Sua had mentioned, like, hey, that's what we're here for. What kind of friends would we be if we just sat around, and had laughs while you were struggling by yourself in silence? So, yeah, I'm glad that Sua was able to give him that role. And I think all of his friends did at some point remind him. I think at the sports festival they mentioned, like, hey, that's what we're here for. We're here to, help carry your burdens with you. Oishizo, thank you so much for the donation. Oishizo says, hi Rita, thank you for always creating opportunities to help a great cause. The pleasure is all mine. The honor is all mine, really. Just part of what was it? One drop in a large bucket, right? A lot of people are doing a really awesome work out there. And I just want to do my part. Yeah. Mr. Grimheart, thank you so much for the donation and the lovely message. Mr. Grimheart says, remember that even if you don't know yet, you are loved. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anonymous, thank you so much for showing your supporting Rita. Oh my gosh, thank you. Red Pudding, thank you so much for the donation. Red Pudding says, always help others that help you. Isn't that, no, that I was going to say that's one of the salvagers rule, but I think it was like, treat others the way you want to be treated. So a little gift back for always doing amazing streams and being an inspiring personality, Rita. Thank you so much, Red Pudding, for the donation and the kind words. And another anonymous donation, thank you very much. And Absolute Link, thank you so much for the $37 donation. I think I mentioned in the first half of this stream, or sorry, not the first half of the stream, in the first stream that somebody flagged, it was $37 helps fund 30 minutes of therapy for an individual. So I know, very specific number, but there is lore behind that. And exactly, by helping others, we also help ourselves. We are a community. No man is an island, right? We help build our community up by helping lift others up. So, thank you all so much for joining me for this presentation. If you're interested, I'd love to turn this into a video. If you feel like you learned a lot from it, be happy to kind of take out all of the, the ums and the uhs and make it a lot more presentable if you ever want to think back and listen in. But yeah, that's all I've prepared for today, for this presentation. So thank you all so much for showing up, showing your support, and I hope you'll continue to check out the other fundraisers that are happening for the rest of Suicide Prevention Month 2024. But as always, I'm the idol to give you the wings to fly, Cyber Angel, Rita Kamishiro, at your service. Bye! See you next time! again, for those who really need to heal it, please stay alive. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate every single one of you. Yeah, and I wish you all nothing but happiness, health, hope, and thanks for being here. Bye!